Hi, my name is George, and I've always tried to think the best of people. Even when I would go through hard times, I always had faith that things would work out in the end. So, when my wife Cynthia told me that she wanted a divorce, well, it truly shocked me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My wife and I met shortly after we both graduated from university. We were young and fell madly in love. After we got married, my wife became an accountant, and I pursued my passion of becoming a nurse. I know it's not the most masculine job, but I love helping people. And being a nurse has allowed me to really give people support in those moments when they need it the most. Unfortunately, my first nursing job wasn't the greatest, as I was placed with people that I didn't get along with. As the only man on staff, they always gave me the hardest patients to care for. For some reason, the other nurses all hated me. After a few months, I was beginning to feel defeated when my mother-in-law grew very ill. And my wife saw an opportunity for me to pursue my passion, while also helping out her family.
George, you hate working at the hospital. So why don't you help out my mother and be her personal nurse? I know she would appreciate having someone that she knew to take care of her, and it would put my mind at ease.
It's a good idea, and it would give me a chance to really get to know her too. And just like that, I became her full-time personal nurse. I had assumed that it would only be temporary, but in the end, I worked for her for 9 years. In that time, we became good friends. She told me so many stories about her life. In her youth, she was quite the wild one apparently, and I would have never known if I hadn't cared for her. She did pay me a little bit during that time, but I didn't mind. After all, Cynthia was making good money as an accountant, and we weren't hard up for cash. During the last 2 years, though, she did become a bit withdrawn, but I just assumed that she was depressed since she knew that she was getting to the end of her life. She had been diagnosed with a terminal illness and was in quite a bit of pain. I did my best to help lift her spirits, though, and to alleviate as much of the pain as possible. Sadly, she lived like that for way longer than any person should. When she passed, though, I hate to admit, but for me it was a mixed reaction. I felt sad, of course, and missed her dearly as I had come to view her as my own mother. But taking care of her for so many years was difficult, and I couldn't work anywhere else while I did. Not more than a week later, though, my wife approached me and gave me divorce papers. It was so out of the blue that I didn't know how to react. Over the years, our marriage had had its ups and downs, just like any other marriage, but I had always thought that we were in a good place. What is the meaning of this? Where's this coming from?
There's no easy way to say this, George, but I haven't loved you for years. And now that my mother has finally died, I don't have use for you anymore. I want you to sign these papers so that I can move on.
I didn't know what to do, so I signed the papers. Between the loss of her mother and finding out that my wife had been cheating on me was almost too much to bear. And on top of that, she was only with me so that I would take care of her mother. Once I signed the papers, I threw them back at her and then stormed out of the room and went to stay at a hotel. For weeks after her death, I spent most of my time looking for another job. But since I hadn't worked a real job in 9 years, no one seemed interested in hiring me. They just viewed me as having no experience and rejected me. Without any income, I was quickly burning through my savings and would soon be forced out on the street. I was so desperate that I started applying for jobs anywhere that was hiring and was preparing myself to work outside of my field. The thought of that depressed me even more, but I knew that I had to do whatever it took to keep going, even if it meant giving up on my passion for helping people. One day, though, I received a call that would forever change the course of my life. It was from a lawyer and he wanted to meet with me. I was both confused and terrified that my ex-wife was suing me. I mean, I had no money, but after the way that she betrayed me, I wouldn't have put it past her to do so. Trembling, I went to see him. And as I sat down across from him in his office, I saw that he was calm and had a very soothing smile on his face.
Hello, sir. I'm very sorry that it has taken me this long to inform you that your former mother-in-law wanted you to have this.
He gently slid an envelope across the desk to me. It had my name handwritten on it, which was clearly in my mother-in-law's handwriting. I was more than a little confused, and slowly I opened the envelope and read the letter inside.
Hello, George. If you are reading this, then I have passed. I have no doubt that my passing has brought a great deal of grief, but please know that I am no longer suffering and that I am in a better place. However, I do wish to ask you for your forgiveness. I learned a few years ago that my daughter has been unfaithful to you, and while it pained me to no end to keep quiet about it, there simply wasn't any alternative for me. I regret to say that I raised a terrible child, and when I found out, she threatened to fire and divorce you and to put me into the worst nursing home she could find. Essentially guaranteeing that I would pass away much sooner, she forced me to promise that I not only would keep her affair a secret, but that I would leave you out of my will. Well, the joke is on her. I had my lawyer write up 2 wills, one where she would get everything, and one where I gave you and only you everything. Unfortunately for her, I only signed the latter one, and my lawyer has assured me that it is legally binding. I prepaid him in advance so that if she has the audacity to fight the will, that he will ensure that she loses that fight and that you are rewarded properly. George, I am so sorry that I couldn't tell you this sooner, but hopefully the wealth that I leave you will help to ensure that you can live a happy and fulfilled life. I truly wish that you were my son. I love you, George, and I cannot tell you how proud I am of you.
As I finished the letter, tears welled up in my eyes. Of course I could forgive her. After all, I now knew what my ex-wife was capable of, and it irritated me that she treated her own mother worse than she had treated me. Once he saw that I had finished the letter, the lawyer then had me sign some paperwork, slowly explaining what each was for. As it turned out, my mother-in-law had been exceedingly wealthy. Her husband had been a genius when it came to finances and had invested a great deal of money for her, so that when he passed, that she would be taken care of. The investments had done so well that she had millions of dollars in her accounts, and all of that was now mine. On top of that, she owned several properties that were now transferred to me, which meant I had my pick of where I now wanted to live. I couldn't believe it. In the span of 24 hours, I went from almost being homeless to being rich. Just as my mother-in-law predicted, my ex-wife did attempt to contest the will. But my mother-in-law's attorney did just as she said he would, and he fought and won every case that my ex threw at me. In the end, she had to accept that she was getting nothing. To make matters worse, since she had committed adultery, I was awarded our house as well, leaving her forced to find somewhere else to live. It's been a few years since then, and from what I heard, the guy that she had cheated on me over the years got her pregnant and then cheated on her as well and then left her. She has tried a few times to reconnect with me, but I've blocked all her calls. There is no way that I'm going to let her back in my life after what she did to me. And as for me, one of the properties that I was left was a massive mansion that I retrofitted into a care facility. I've turned it into a non-profit hospice care facility for those people that can't afford such things. And of course I named it after my mother-in-law as a tribute to her. I use the rent money from the other properties to pay for the facility and for me to live comfortably. So in the end, I get to live out my dream of helping to make the world a better place, and it's all thanks to being kind to her. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Hi there, my name is James, and this is a cautionary tale. It started years ago. I can still remember the day I was driving home after a long day of work and was eager to get home and see my wife, Sarah. I was sitting at a red light waiting for it to change. As soon as it turned green, I can remember looking both ways before slowly rolling through the intersection when suddenly I felt something slam into me and cause my car to flip and roll. When I woke up, I was in an ambulance, and I found out that a drunk driver had run through the light and had hit me. The pain was terrible, and I spent a full week in the hospital before I was finally allowed to go home. Even when I went home, I was still suffering. Both of my legs were broken and my body was severely bruised. It was months before I could return to work, and I still have a limp to this day. The only consolation was that we were able to sue the drunk driver and were awarded enough money to cover my medical bills, as well as a large sum of money to cover any future expenses. It didn't make things okay, but it helped. After the medical bills were covered, we weren't sure what to do with the rest of the money, so we put it into a savings account and decided that we would figure out what to do with it later. So as I returned to work, I struggled to help my wife with the chores around the house. Sadly, my work shifts were all I could handle at the time, And so, my wife suggested that my mother-in-law move in with us and help. At first, she was a blessing as I would come home from work exhausted and barely able to stand. I would walk into the house using my cane and just make it to the couch before I needed to sit and rest before doing anything else. It was a relief to see the house was clean and that dinner was ready for my wife and I to enjoy. By the end of the second week, my mother-in-law began asking if we could leave her a few dollars here and there to help pay for cleaning supplies or groceries so that she didn't have to use her own money. She was on a fixed income, and my wife promised me that she would take care of it so that I wouldn't have to worry about it. I trusted the two of them and focused on my physical therapy as well as my mental therapy too. The accident had taken a great toll on me both physically and mentally. So I knew that I had some serious work to do. And so things went smoothly for a few weeks. I would do my best to work a full shift at work, and when my wife and I would come home, my mother-in-law would be there waiting for us. She would keep the house spotless and make meals for us. Occasionally, my father-in-law would join us and we would have a nice family meal together. As far as I could tell, things were going great. That is, until my mother-in-law made a comment one day that caught me off guard.
You know, it's funny. I know both you and Sarah are working full-time, but back when my husband and I were your age, we were struggling to keep money in the bank account, even though we were both working long hours. We were constantly living paycheck to paycheck. I don't know how you two do it.
Well, we do all right for ourselves, but it doesn't hurt that there's about $300,000 in the account from my settlement. The look of shock on her face told me that she had no idea that we had that much money.
You have how much money in your bank account? And you aren't doing anything with it?
Yeah, we do. Although it's only in there because we haven't decided what to do with it yet. We do intend to invest it at some point, but haven't gotten around to it yet. She nodded, and then went about serving dinner for the rest of us. I was a bit confused as to why she was asking about our finances. I later found out from my wife that she lent her mother her debit card from time to time, so that if she needed to buy things from the store, that she could. At the time, this didn't bother me, as I figured that if I couldn't trust my in-laws, then who could I trust? And so, things kept going on like this. Over time, my legs got stronger, and I needed my cane less and less. However, it all came to an abrupt end, when I decided that since I was making such great progress in my healing, that I should buy myself something to celebrate. I spoke with my wife, of course, and she agreed that it would be a great idea to buy a treadmill. It would be something that both of us would enjoy using, and it would help me to continue to heal. With my wife in agreement, I went down to the wellness store and picked out a treadmill that would be perfect. To my surprise, though, when I went to purchase it, my card got declined. Embarrassed and worried, I called up my bank to find out what was going on. Hi there. I just tried to buy a treadmill, and it wouldn't go through. Is there a reason? Well, there isn't any money in that account, sir. Maybe you intended to use a different account? No money? That was impossible. There was over $300,000 still in that account. Panicking, I then called my wife who was at home. Hey, honey, did you move the money out of the account? I just tried to buy the treadmill we talked about and the account is empty.
Empty? How is that possible? Wait, oh no, I think I might know.
What are you talking about, Sarah? Do you know where the money is?
My mother has been talking lately that she needs a new car, and I was wondering how exactly she was going to afford it. But I can't imagine that she would take all of the money.
I quickly hurried home just in time to see my mother-in-law pull up as well in a fancy luxury car. In the back seats were shopping bags from designer stores. From inside our home, my wife and father-in-law came rushing out as well.
Mom, what on earth did you do?
Oh, don't worry. I just spent a little bit of money since you and James weren't using it. I figured that I would put it to good use. What do you think of my new car?
Good use? That was our money that we were saving. How could you possibly think that it's okay for you to take?
Relax. I'm sure my husband can pay you back some of it.
The hell I will. I can't believe you would do something like this. You're going to return every last thing you bought and then give them back their money immediately.
But I'll never be able to afford a car like this again if I do that. I deserve it.
She was whining, but there was no way that any of us were going to allow her to get away with it. However, before any of us knew what she was doing, she hopped into the car and sped off. None of us could believe it. We all looked at one another and knew what we had to do, but were hesitant. That's when my father-in-law pulled out his cell phone and made a call. My wife and I looked at one another confused, but he assured us that he had taken care of it. Within an hour, the police that my father-in-law called picked her up, and they were holding her at the station. My wife and I wanted to go and pick her up and question her, but my father-in-law insisted that we let her stay in jail overnight. As it turned out, he had a friend in the police department that he had asked him to detain her overnight to teach her a lesson. In the morning, we went and brought her home. As soon as she was in our house, she broke down and apologized.
I'm so sorry. I got carried away. I just saw how much money you had in your account and I couldn't help myself. Please, will you forgive me?
Sarah and I exchanged glances of concern.
You can start by giving me back my debit card. We'll have to change our PIN numbers, of course, and you're going to return everything that you bought.
Nodding, she agreed. It was quite a hassle to track down all the stores that she had went to, but we managed to get all of them. Getting the dealership to take the car back was the biggest challenge, but after we explained how she had used our money to buy the car, they relented and finally allowed us to return it as well. So in the end, we were able to recover all of the money that she had stolen, and it had become a life lesson for us. My father-in-law kept a tight leash on my mother-in-law from that moment on. He never allowed her to have more than $50 on her at any given time. He had lost all trust in her, and so did we. She was no longer allowed into our home unless we were there. In the end, it all turned out okay, but we were lucky that my father-in-law knew someone on the police force. If he hadn't, there was no telling what my mother-in-law might have done. Thanks for watching. Please, like the video for the algorithm.
Hey there, my name is Anna, and I wanted to share with you a story about me and my sister, Terry. Terry and I are only a year apart in age, and growing up, we were always competitive with each other. Since we were so close in age, we tended to play in the same leagues for baseball and soccer. Even though we were on the same teams, we pushed each other to see who could get the most points. In college, though, it was the worst. I was dating this very cute guy named Tom. Tom was on the football team, and he was so attractive. We had been dating my entire freshman year when Terry got him drunk at a party and convinced him to sleep with her. Tom dumped me, and they started dating. After that, I chose to distance myself from Terry. I was devastated that my own sister was so competitive that she would steal my boyfriend from me. What made matters even worse was that as soon as I moved on, she instantly broke up with Tom. She didn't have feelings for him and had only wanted to steal him from me. Years later, I was surprised when I got word from her that she had gotten engaged. Briefly, I thought that maybe our rivalry had ended and that she had moved on from such childish nonsense. When I met her fiancé, Jason, I was surprised to see how kind and loving he was. He had an amazing job and was making great money. Their wedding was so fancy and probably cost more than I made in 1 year. It was worth it, though. Terry looked amazing in her dress, and the two of them did seem genuinely happy. Not long after their wedding, I met Cameron. He was a friend of Jason's, and I saw him at their wedding. It was love at first sight. When I saw him all dressed up, I just knew that he was the one for me. Soon after, we started dating, got engaged, and eventually married. With Jason and Cameron being friends, Terry and I began to grow a bit closer, although it still felt very awkward. While Jason and Cameron would hang out together, Terry and I would spend time together as well, and just as before, she tried to make everything out to be a game to see who had a better life.
Oh, I see you and Cameron bought a new car? Shame that it's an older model. Ours has so many more features. Maybe it isn't too late to trade it in?
It was just like when we were children, except now, instead of her wanting a bigger dollhouse, instead, she insisted on getting a bigger house in general. If we bought one that had 8 bedrooms, she then forced Jason to buy one with 10. My husband bought a minivan for us, and a week later, Terry and Jason bought a massive SUV with all the bells and whistles. We bought a boat and they bought a yacht. No matter what we did, they had to outstage us. It was quite annoying, especially since it was a one-sided game. We didn't care what they had. That all changed, though, when Jason's company downsized and he lost his job. I tried to comfort my sister, but that only made her angry. Oh, Terry, I'm so sorry to hear about Jason. Is there anything Cameron and I can do to help?
It's fine. Jason will find something, I'm sure. In fact, I'm sure that we'll be able to afford an even bigger house once he does.
I wanted to have sympathy for her, but she made it next to impossible. However, her premonition didn't come true. Jason did manage to find another job, but it didn't pay nearly as well as his previous one, and they were forced to sell their home and find something more affordable. I could tell that this made Terry furious, but she never said anything. That is until Cameron got a promotion and a large raise. It felt a bit cruel to celebrate our success while my sister and her husband were struggling. And so I kept reaching out to them and offering any help that they might need. At first, my sister refused, but after a few weeks, she changed her mind, and they began to come over every week for dinner. Both Cameron and I felt that it was our duty to help our family. After all, I only had the one sister, and so it was important for us to help them. But after the weeks began to pass, I started to notice that Cameron began to get very nervous and agitated on the nights that Jason and Terry would come over. Confused, I confronted him about this. "Hey Cameron, is everything okay? You've been acting really strangely lately."
Well, it's just that your sister and Jason have been coming over for dinner every week for a while now, and I was wondering how much longer we would keep doing this.
"What do you mean? They're family. Why wouldn't we keep helping them for as long as they need it?" Cameron was staring at the ground. I could tell that there was something bothering him, but that he didn't want to say anything. "Cameron, what's going on?" My heart began to pound as I worried what his response might be.
I'm sorry. I don't want to cause problems. But your sister...
"What about my sister?"
Well, she keeps saying and doing things that are making me uncomfortable.
"What kinds of things is she saying?" Reluctantly, he gave me his phone. It was open to some conversations between him and Terry, and I instantly could see what he was talking about.
Hey Cameron, we're coming over for dinner again tonight. Maybe we could make something up and find some alone time together.
Terry, you need to stop saying things like that. I love your sister.
Oh, Anna is a stick in the mud, you know that. I would be able to do more for you than she can.
I couldn't believe what I was reading. And as I looked at more and more of these messages, a new one came through. It was a picture of my sister wearing see-through lingerie.
That isn't the first image that she's sent, but I've been deleting them because I didn't want to keep those on my phone in case you found them and got the wrong idea. I was hoping that if I kept turning her down, she would eventually stop.
Well, we need to put a stop to this right now.
And it isn't just messages. Every time they come over, she keeps touching me too.
Cameron and I waited until Jason and Terry had begun to eat before bringing up Terry's behavior. Slowly, I slid Cameron's phone to Jason as I stared at Terry. "Terry, I thought that we had moved past this kind of childishness."
What? What are you whining about? Oh.
I showed her the kinds of messages you've been sending me.
Jason's face grew very angry as he read the messages and then saw the picture that Terry had sent to my husband.
You had promised me that this would never happen again. You promised me that the last time that you did this was a mistake, and that you had learned your lesson.
Just stop, Jason. I wouldn't have to go looking for someone better if you weren't such a failure.
A failure? I have a good job and make good money.
But not as much as Cameron. Sorry, but I deserve more. And quite frankly, Anna, I deserve more than you. I would be a better wife for Cameron than you.
No, Terry, you don't. Unfortunately for you, this won't be like back in college. Before she could say another word, I grabbed her by the arm and dragged her outside and slammed the door in her face. Jason apologized and then left shortly afterwards as well. A week later, Jason called and told us that he had filed for divorce and had kicked my sister out of the house. Part of the reason that he had lost his job was due to Terry hitting on other men, including Jason's former boss. Terry was constantly on the prowl for anyone that she saw as a means to rise up the social ladder, and that was exactly what she was trying to do with Cameron. Part of me felt bad for her, but then Cameron reminded me that it hadn't been the first time that she had done this to me. With that in mind, I steeled my heart as I heard how she had been forced to get 2 part-time jobs just to pay for a 1-bedroom apartment. Jason had kept evidence from every time that she had cheated on him, as well as those times that she had attempted and failed and used at court. The judge that presided over the case saw the mountain of evidence against her and denied her alimony or any kind of compensation. A year later, Jason and Cameron decided to go into business together, and I'm happy to say that they have never been more successful. Jason has even found someone that treats him far better than my sister ever did, and I'm happy for him. Sadly, I do know that my sister is struggling right now, but this is the bed that she has made, and now she has to lie in it. Thanks for watching. Like the video for the algorithm. I'm Emily, and when I was in high school, I became very ill. The doctors at first didn't know what was wrong with me, but later found out that I had several tumors on my spine. They were so huge and painful and putting pressure on my spine. Thankfully, one day I had them removed safely, but by the time that they were able to do so, they had done damage to my spine and I was left paralyzed from the waist down. I was thrown into a depression, and if it wasn't for all my friends and family, I'm not sure how I would have made it through. Their support was so greatly appreciated. Even my boyfriend at the time, Mark, was wonderful. Everyone was lending a hand and making sure that I was comfortable and doing well, but he was the best. He was always there for me, lending me a hand getting ready, and always made sure to give me a shoulder to cry on when I needed it. Mark was always a very empathetic person. It probably came from the fact that he knew what loss felt like. When he was very young, his mother passed away. This made him a very understanding and compassionate person. His father was quite understanding and caring as well. He always made a point of helping me out with things. Every time I went over, the two of them would make sure that if I needed help with anything, that they had me covered.
Hey Emily, tax season is coming up. Did you need help filing your taxes?
Oh, it is. Yes, I could really need some help doing them. I have no idea how to. Both of them were such a great help. But all of that changed after we graduated from college and got married. Mark never changed and only became a better and better partner. But his father began to make cruel comments.
Must you leave your wheelchair in the middle of the room? I nearly tripped over it just now.
I'm sorry, I thought that I had left it out of the way. I'll try to only place it out of the way in the future. I didn't know where this comment was coming from. I had watched him enter the room, and he hadn't even walked anywhere near to where my chair was.
I just can't believe that Mark chose you, especially considering how you're stuck in a wheelchair. Why couldn't he have picked someone normal?
That comment hurt my feelings a lot, but it wasn't the last time that Mark's father would say such a thing, and it hurt just as much every time that he did. As it turned out, he had only been nice to me in the beginning because he liked the attention that he got for being kind to me. But he had always assumed that Mark would move on and find a partner that had functioning legs, that I was just a phase that he would have grown out of. When I told Mark about what his father had said to me, he stormed over to his father's house and had a massive shouting match with him. Afterwards, he told me to just ignore his father from now on, that the best idea was to just cut him out of our lives as much as possible to avoid his hurtful words. Sometime later, a miracle happened, and I became pregnant. We had only begun to try to have children and were overjoyed at how quickly our dream became a reality. At the time, I was ignoring any and all calls from Mark's father. But once he found out that I was pregnant, the calls and messages began to become more frequent.
How dare you ignore my calls? You're my daughter-in-law. I demand that you come over and cook dinner for me. This is an outrage. How dare you continue to ignore my calls? This better not happen when my grandchild is born. There is no way that you will keep my grandchild away from me.
They just kept coming, and I did my best to ignore them, but he wouldn't stop. It got so bad that every time the phone would ring or vibrate, that my heart began to beat fast, as I was worried that it was him harassing me again. More than once, I could have sworn I had seen him lurking in our neighborhood, but I could never confirm it. It almost felt like he was stalking us. Then one day, Mark's father had had enough, and he came over and knocked so hard on the door that I thought that it would break off the hinges. He called out and demanded that I come outside at once to speak with him.
This has gone on long enough. Emily, I demand that you come out here at once and speak to me. You are my daughter-in-law, and you need to show me respect.
Afraid, I messaged my husband. I didn't know if I should comply with his demands. After all, the worst he could do was yell at me since we would be on our front porch and in view of all the neighbors. After a minute, I decided to confront him and I opened the door and went outside. Why are you like this? How can you be so cruel to the mother of your only grandchild?
You have no business speaking to me like that. And why are you even pregnant? How are you supposed to raise a child while stuck in that wheelchair? I have no doubt that you probably don't help out around the house, and that you make Mark do all the work. After all, how are you supposed to cook or clean without working legs?
I saw red. How dare he say such mean things to me, especially since they weren't true. I had learned long ago how to do such things, and I prided myself on keeping a clean and organized home. It was one of the things that Mark truly appreciated about me. He loved coming home to a clean home and a hot meal waiting for him. I knew that my disability didn't hold me back, and for Mark's father to be such a jerk about it made me want to scream at him. But I knew that my neighbors were watching, and I didn't want to make a scene.
Why don't you just divorce my son? That way he can find himself a woman with legs that work, and so that he can be a happier person.
I love your son more than anything, and he loves me right back. Please, why won't you just leave us alone? Why are you so cruel? Enraged, he rushed over and grabbed my wheelchair and tried to drag me towards the stairs.
Fine then, if you won't leave willingly. I'll force you to leave.
He pulled with all his might, but I quickly engaged the brakes on my chair, which were very strong. The wheelchair didn't budge, which only made him angrier. Fearing for my baby, I called out for help. Help! Help! When no one came, though, I punched Mark's father in the stomach as hard as I could to get him to stop. He stumbled back and then fell down the stairs. It was only a few steps, but they were made of concrete. Suddenly, Mark showed up, and seeing his father at the bottom of the steps, he called for an ambulance. That night, I told Mark what happened, and he promised me that he believed me, and that he was just relieved that I hadn't been hurt. But I still worried about what his father would do next. The next day, Mark's father showed up along with 2 police officers. We spoke with them on our porch.
This is the woman that assaulted me, officers.
Is this true? Did you attack him?
No, I only punched him because he was trying to throw me down the stairs. It was self-defense. Just then, our next-door neighbor came over.
It's true, officers. I saw what happened, and it was self-defense, as she says. That man tried to hurt her.
The officers nodded and then asked if I wanted to press charges against Mark's father. Mark spoke up for me and said that he did. The look of shock on his father's face was priceless. He had tried to get me arrested and ended up getting himself in trouble instead. From that day forward, we didn't hear from him again. His father did end up getting a light sentence as it was his first offense, so he just had to do a lot of community service and was forced to stay far away from us. Mark does speak with him on the phone from time to time and even sends him photos of our daughter, but we both refuse to let him meet her. I know it must be hard on Mark since his father is the only parent that he has, but I honestly am grateful that we have put up a boundary of no contact with him. After the incident, I don't know if I would feel safe around his father ever again. Thanks for watching. Please like the video for the algorithm.